Hello and welcome to the 12th in our video series on each of the 15 competencies of the MHS model of emotional intelligence as measured by one's EQ. I'm David Cory, and I'm here with my colleague Kim Cairns from the Emotional Intelligence Training Company, and we're here to talk to you today about impulse control. Impulse control is one of the critically important competencies which allow us to control what drives us to take action. And as you know, there's a lot of things that drive us to take action. And we want to talk about that from in terms of more of a micro kind of, more of a macro look at our behavior, and then bring it down and bring it maybe internal to us and see how it plays out there as well. In fact, I was thinking about these broadcasts that we do and thinking that it's difficult for me to control my impulse as a trainer and to want to tell everyone who's watching everything I know about this. From the years of reading and reflection and thinking about this, I have some information that I want to share, and it's difficult for me to control the impulse to do that. But what we wanted to do rather was we wanted to actually have a discussion, have a conversation. And upon reflecting on today's topic, it occurred to me that actually impulse control is critical in effective conversations. If we don't control the impulse to want to tell the other person what we know, get our opinion out there, and sort of make our argument, if we don't control that impulse, we may not learn the other person's position. We may not get to know and have the benefit of their side and then have this true dialogue back and forth. Thoughts, Kim?
Yeah, David, we did have a bit of a humorous conversation this morning around Dave's desire to train, and definite strengths in training. And looking at this video series, the intention for us was, how can we layer the learning for people? Given the fact that a lot of our viewers are people that have worked with us, come to whatever of our courses, the intent was to layer on the learning as well as stimulate some interest in EI for those people that just happen to drop in. And as those of you who have watched us for a while know, we have developed different patterns during different broadcasts. And so today we were chuckling about Dave's impulse to train. And over a couple of decades of working on EI, yes, sir, you have an abundance of knowledge and wisdom to impart. And so it's both humorous and it's enlightening to see you arrive at this place of, no, I'm going to sink into this conversation. And I think that's so essential with regard to impulse control. It is about being fully present in whatever we're engaged in the moment. So for me, it's what I picture in my own mind is this little biplane with a banner behind it. Kim, what is your intent in this engagement? And then right behind that is another little biplane flying across my mind saying, and what is your impact so far, given that intent? So those are my little quick reminders in my own head about whether I'm fully present here or I'm being distracted by some other thoughts, some other directions.
We really have to set aside our ego, and I think one of the reasons that you're so good at conversations, Kim, is that you're able to do that. You're able to sort of set aside your agenda and set aside your ego, in effect, and really listen. You're so good at listening. And that's such a critical piece of conversations, when we're not present and when we're not listening, really listening to what people are saying, not just with the words that they're using, but with their whole body, with their facial expression, with their body posture, with everything that they have to present. If we're not doing that, what are we missing? So it's like again, we've talked about this before, this idea that when we're giving into an impulse, then there's a possibility that we're missing something, that we're not getting all the information. And when we see leaders, and we do see leaders, we see them steamrolling their agenda. They're missing all kinds of critical information for them to move forward in the most effective way. So this idea of controlling those impulses, to let our egos get in the way, to let our egos drive us, and like right now, it's again having to control the impulse to continue to talk and just take a pause and just, okay, what do you think, Kim? What do you think about this idea?
Well, I really like that, Dave. I think that what goes through my mind when I'm in conversation with someone, it's about paying attention to what's going on for that person in the dialogue. So it is about body position, and it is about watching the eyes. And I know that when I'm engaged in conversation with somebody, I can see those eyes slightly start to glaze over. And I know that the listening part's gone. So I think to have really meaningful engagement with people, it's important to maybe just stop at that point and say, do you have something else that you need to do right now? Is there something that that you're thinking? It just seems to me like we're drifting apart here in this. So just let me know whether that's the case or not. So again, that's plugging in that assertiveness component rather than going on a bunch of assumptions about, oh, I've lost this person, we're no longer engaged. Bring that little elephant out onto the table and talk about it. So it is about, for me, when I think about that, it's what's to me, what are my indicators when somebody's not listening, not engaged in the process, and then being able to recognize that in myself. When am I starting to drift away? When I've got those little thoughts coming into my head about, oh, I've got that meeting coming up in half an hour, to be able to just say, okay, yes, that's important, and I don't need to think about that right now. What I need to do is re-engage in this process. So that self-management component is so much an essential part of impulse control.
Other models of EQ, or other models of emotional intelligence rather, do use those words like self-management and emotional regulation. These are other references to this concept, but impulse control really nails it. It's really the most discrete kind of skill or competency that we can talk about, and we think about it in all kinds of ways. As I mentioned, from the micro, that is, what impulses am I controlling right in this moment in my conversation with you, for example, and to the more obvious, what people think of, like the chocolate cake or the excessive alcohol consumption. We think about impulse control in that regard as well. But it's just such a critical competency to our overall effectiveness. And when people don't have it, they create all kinds of issues for themselves in not, again, being present, in learning, in being present and saying to someone, my relationship with you is so important. I really want to know what it is that you have to say. I'm curious about what you're thinking about, how you're feeling, and I really want to know. So staying open is a critical part of impulse control.
Yeah, definitely, David. And your notion around curiosity there too. I mean, curiosity is at the core of this, and real curiosity. And what it brings to my mind is, if I'm remaining curious, I'm not formulating my response to whatever it is you're saying to me in the moment. I'm leaning in and truly listening to you, and hearing what your viewpoint is, rather than formulating my next surge in the conversation. So again, it's being able to take a look at what's my default response when I'm engaged in conversation with somebody. If my default response is, I want to get this next point in, I know that in some dialogues that might be important, but not in very many. And so to say, okay, that's my default given this topic, given this level of engagement. What are some other possibilities here? So again, being curious with myself in that moment about, oh, here I go, I'm leaning in, ready to go with my default on this. Okay, lean back, take a breath, ask another question, inquire more, gain more information from the other person, and let them know that I'm truly listening to them by eye contact, by my body posture.
So what happens, Kim, when someone can't control the impulse to look at their phone? What happens in that situation? Have you ever been in a situation, Kim, where people have had difficulty controlling their impulse to take a look at their phone and see what the latest post on Facebook was, or the latest email message that came in, or the latest tweet? Just curious.
Quite regularly, actually. Quite regularly in this culture. You know, it's and which I find interesting too, because those little devices have become such an obvious and ever-present part of our culture, and of a lot of interactions in our life. And, and I think that, you know, again, there's an opportunity to, my default is to be regularly checking my phone because I'm expecting some important emails, or I'm expecting some information from a person that I'll need to talk to later today. Again, there's that opportunity for me to say to myself, okay, if I'm saying yes to looking at my cell phone, I'm saying no to remaining engaged in this process.
Yes.
So it's that knowing every time what I'm saying yes to means I'm saying no to something else. And what's of most importance in this time and place? Again, coming right back into the present. So those are those little those internal reminders of those constant shifts in how I'm operating in whatever we're talking about, whatever our conversation is.
Yes. I'm laughing because that is something that is extremely common in present day society, and I'm guilty of it myself. There's that, you know, you're in conversation with someone, you're with friends, and it's like, oh, I haven't checked my phone in quite some time. I wonder what I'm missing. This whole idea of fear of missing out, FOMO. Well, you know. And I had to laugh that there was this woman who had written this book called The Joy of Missing Out, JOMO. And really what she was talking about was when we resist that impulse to be distracted or to have our attention taken elsewhere by our technology, then we experience the joy of the people who are sitting right in front of us. And imagine what that says to someone when you're over at their house and you're there to see them, and you can't put your phone down. It tells them that they're unimportant. It tells them that you'd rather look at your phone than have a conversation with them. And I'm guilty of it myself, and I have to really guard against it and make sure that I don't get caught in that trap of saying to the people that I care about, I don't care about you, by looking at my phone and through my actions saying I'm less interested in our conversation. So I think it's a contemporary issue that Kim and I have experienced in many cultures. It's not our culture only. It's all over the world that this seems to be happening. And how can we be present for each other? How can we truly invest in relationships and conversation? And that's where the synergy, the real teamwork and leadership is. It's in those relationships. It's not in the communication that we get via technology. It's in those live, in-person relationships where we, again, resist the impulse to be distracted and have our attention taken elsewhere.
Yeah, Dave, and I think too, you know, there's an opportunity there. I mean, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of the person that's not pulling out their device. I think there's a real opportunity there to flex that assertiveness muscle a bit, and to actually make comments, not in terms of attacking or pointing out you doing something bad by taking a look at your phone, but just stating that, okay, I feel that this is an important conversation for us to have, and I feel somewhat let down that you're not engaged to the level that I thought we'd agreed to engage in this conversation. So what I'd like to suggest is, if we can talk about this without the devices present, if we can give this 20 minutes, we can probably come to some great endpoints with regard to this issue rather than being distracted. So I just wanted to let you know that in this moment. That's where I'm coming from. I'm really interested in continuing to engage with you. How do you feel about that?
We also talked earlier, Kim, about having the flexibility to give into some of those impulses as well. That if we were to control every impulse that we ever had, what a boring life that might be. And so yes, we are going to give into the occasional impulse, and we're going to go in a different direction just on a whim and see where that takes us as well, and be open to that also.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's great ways to do that, Dave. I think, even to articulate that I'm going to blurt out something here is kind of a prelude to, okay, this thought's in my head and I'm just going to blurt it out.
Yeah.
And it's recognizing that I had this strong impulse to do it, and announcing that, and then seeing where that goes. And then I have the ability to backtrack on that, or to modify that statement, but you're right, those impulsive, spontaneous moments in life are so important too. So it's not that giving into impulse is always a bad thing. It's about balance and flow with regard to impulse control too.
Yes. We don't always recognize impulse control. Sometimes we think that something like procrastination is not connected to impulse control, and of course it is. We're giving into the impulse to do a preferred activity and put off less preferred activities, and so impulse control and self-discipline have this interesting relationship with one another as well, and understanding that to construct our day the way that we really want it requires a great deal of impulse control. We have to control the impulse to sleep in, and we have to control the impulse to not be involved in exercise. We have to control the impulse to want to put off something till later, that procrastination piece, etc., which requires a tremendous amount of self-discipline and understanding more about our goals and what we value, and tapping into our self-awareness about how we're going to feel once we accomplish those things that are important to us and are priorities for us as well. So impulse control runs through everything. And when we lack impulse control, we get easily sidetracked. We're off over here. We're off over here. And I'm speaking to you from the perspective of someone who struggles with impulse control on a daily basis, maybe even a moment-by-moment basis, to, again, be present, to focus on my goals, to not be taken off track. And these things are very difficult for me and require a lot of effort. So I completely relate to people who struggle with impulsivity and impulse control, and work on it daily. And as we've mentioned many times in the video series, you will hear us say this over and over again, is getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And we don't have perfect impulse control. There's we're always working on it and trying to have that nice balance that we talked about between being patient and self-disciplined on the one hand, and not so patient and self-disciplined that we don't allow for fun and for unique and novel things to enter into our lives.
Yeah, Dave, and I think, well, one of my thoughts is, when we're working with people individually, often what I'll hear is, okay, well, I've been aware of this for years, but I've tried a bunch of different things, and what I want is, I just want the steps to not have this anymore. And I mean, at that point, I usually laugh, because I think that's so human too. But the thing that comes to mind is, if I am working on my own impulse control, and I am at times, I mean, this is the whole notion of emotional intelligence. It's an ongoing process, and we're all works in progress. So there's no end point to this. The mastery is in continuing to try and gain that greater awareness of how I'm operating emotionally, and realizing that I have choices within that. So to that point, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is that reflection on the day. And if I'm working on impulse control, to take a look back and say, okay, when was I impulsive today? And what were the results of that impulsivity? What alternative actions, choices do I have given that information? So it's not, I don't have to sit down for an hour to go through that, but I can just take a look back and say, I was impulsive in these situations today. Some of the results were positive. Some of the results weren't. What was at play there? What was I feeling? And how did I manage those feelings? So again, it's about gaining that deeper understanding of my own way of operating.
So understanding what are impulses for you,
yes,
and understanding what control looks like for you in order to achieve your goals.
That's
and
right.
It's gonna be so different for each one of us.
Absolutely, yes.
Can't say this is the way to do it.
No.
Have to say what's a better balance for you.
Yes.
Between, again, control, self-discipline, patience, all indicators of impulse control, and giving into those impulses, letting those motivations take you in the direction of your goals, so that you can do what it is that you want to do, get what you want to get out of life.
Well, and Dave, when you mentioned goals, I mean, what comes to my mind too is another essential part is, what are my values? What are my values at play in this dialogue, in this situation, in this meeting? And having those be pretty prominent in my mind. You know, values, intent, impact. What am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? Those are little quick checklists that, or as I said, the biplane with the banner flying across my head. Because I think we all have to develop our own little indicators of, okay, pay attention here for a second. Oh yes, okay. What I wanted to do here was actually engage in dialogue with Dave.
Yes. Yes. And that's so critical, Kim, what you just said. Engage in dialogue. We are moving towards a world of greater collaboration, not less. And so these skills will become increasingly important with time. Traditional notions of leadership, traditional notions of teams are everyone knowing what it is they need to do and doing it. That's the past. The present is, I know what I need to do, and I'm going to connect with you and fully understand more about what it is you need to do, so that we can work together, so that we have that level of interdependence where we create this synergy, which is bigger than the two of us, bigger than the team, bigger than what any single one of us could accomplish alone. We're just beginning to really understand this notion of synergy and how it can change the world. As long as we don't control our impulses to not be present, as long as we don't control our impulses to go off and do things unilaterally on our own without checking in with others, we run the risk of not testing our reality. As we've discussed, we run the risk of ineffective and inefficient problem solving. We run the risk of not demonstrating enough empathy for the people that are close to us, that are important to us. We run the risk of not having effective relationships. And as you mentioned, Kim, we run the risk of not behaving according to our own values. And we all know what it feels to feel out of alignment with our own values. Feels terrible.
Yes, definitely, Dave. And I think, I mean, I love how you've woven that together there. Again, we're talking about weaving these competencies together. And that notion that we can occasionally zero in on a competency and then notice ourselves the impact on some of the other EI competencies. So again, it's that heightened awareness of how I'm operating, constantly seeking to be more aware of all the operating parts of my emotional operating system.
Kim, we're coming up to the end of our time together, and just sort of wanting to try to summarize and bring it to a bit of a close, and just really wanting people to consider all the ways that impulse control is important to their effectiveness in their day-to-day operation, in their day-to-day, in their work, in their lives, in their family relationships with friends. Are you being fully present? Are you patient enough? Are you too patient? Do you wait too long? Do you give people too much leeway, and instead of maybe using some assertiveness and saying, you know what, enough is enough, and saying what it is that you really need in relationships. So impulse control is just sort of connected to, it's almost like tacked on to all of the other 15 competencies, and we see when we don't use a particular competency to the appropriate extent, that maybe we've given into an impulse to go on to something else, to overlook the effectiveness that we could have had in the moment. So it's strategic, it's tactical, it's both in the moment and long term. How are we going to use impulse control to really control those, really the impulses to take us off path, off the road that we're traveling? How can we stick to our road in the best possible way without going here and without going there? And that's hard for those of us who like shiny things. Speaking from personal experience, we'll be driving along and, oh, there's a shiny thing, I'm going to take that off ramp, and pretty soon we're off-roading, and so much for the path we're on, and it's tremendously ineffective and inefficient for us. Kim, what would you like to add? What would you like to throw in our final minute or two that we have here?
Well, one thing, Dave, and I don't know whether we've mentioned this before in our broadcasts, but I think there's a valuable resource for people who are wanting to take a bit of a deeper look at each one of these competencies, and that is the EQ Edge, the third edition by Stein and Book, and you can get it through Amazon for a reasonable price. But what I like about the EQ Edge is it devotes a chapter to each competency. And so I think as we're talking about these competencies, if people are interested in taking a bit of a deeper look and also having a series of exercises and self-assignments for each one of these competencies, take a look at the EQ Edge. Make sure you get the third edition. And again, it's available at Amazon. And I really recommend it for people that are wanting to have something to refer back to. If I feel like I'm going off course, I can go read the chapter again and say, oh yeah, okay, these are the things that apply to my way of operating, and what are my choices given that? So I wanted to throw that in. And again, you can reach either one of us, David at EI Training Company or Kim at EI Training Company. Love to hear from folks. Just in the last week, I've heard from a couple of people in Botswana that I haven't been in contact with for a while, with a couple of stories around how EI is unfolding in their life, and that's always a great thing for us. So thanks for joining us today, and hope to see you again.
Thanks, Kim, and I just want to echo and reinforce what Kim has mentioned, and throw out another couple of resources. One is The Other Kind of Smart by Harvey Deutschendorf, and I've known Harvey for a number of years, a wonderful contemporary and colleague of ours, and lots of great stories, and again, more information about each of the 15 competencies. You might also want to take a look at the book called EQ in Action by Marcia Hughes and James Tyrrell. And again, another great resource on this particular model, which we find one of the most useful and applicable models for improving the way we are emotionally intelligent in the world. So thanks again for joining us. I'm David Cory, and here together with my colleague Kim Cairns. When you see us in little separate screens, you know we're in different cities in Western Canada. When you see us together sitting on the couch, we happen to be in the same city at the same time, and that's always fun for us. And as we approach this holiday season, we want to wish you all the best and happy holidays to everyone. And we really look forward to seeing you in the new year. So thanks, everyone. Love to hear from you. Send us messages and by email. Join us on Facebook and Twitter, etc. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks again, everyone. Bye for now.